Hey, I'm Ryan, and this is Ludo Lodge, a channel about sparking growth in your journey as a game designer, and a channel that's been pretty quiet as of late. I've kind of had this channel on pause a bit as I've been pursuing some other projects and kind of putting my time into some other places, but I wanted to come back and at least do this video this year that I've done for the last couple of years, which is looking at, of all the new to me board games I played in the previous year, which are the ones that inspired me most as a designer. And that's different from the ones that I maybe enjoyed the most as a player. If you're interested in hearing which ones I did enjoy most as a player, I actually have a video on my Roles in the Family channel that I do with my younger brother Daniel that we count down our top 10 games from the last year. I'll have that linked in the description if you want to check it out. But this is kind of a different angle. It's really, what are the games that got me excited about game design, that maybe surprised me in what the design did that I hadn't seen in other designs. It can be kind of a variety of things, but ultimately it kind of all channels into this like excitement about game design and thinking about game design and wanting to work on my own projects. So I'm going to be counting down the top 5 from this past year. Let's kick it off with number 5, which is Spots. Now, this is a push your luck dice game about collecting these dogs that, it's very cute how they have the spots that kind of match the spots on the dice. And on your turn, you're going to be picking one of these tricks to perform from the selection. There's 6 of them out there that'll define some way that you're going to get to roll your dice. And then when you roll dice, you're going to always get to place any of them on dogs where they match, where you have matching spots. But any that you can't place have to get buried in your backyard where your doghouse is. And if ever what's buried in your backyard exceeds, I believe, 7, you bust, and any dice on dogs is removed. And ultimately, it's a race to complete 6 dogs first. And there's a few things I just have liked about this kind of, simple push your luck game, but I think it does some things that I haven't seen from some other push your luck games. One is the way that it kind of spreads the push your luck over multiple turns. There's a lot of examples of push your luck games that you push, and then you either bust or you stop within the context of a turning. You're either going to get the rewards or, lose out on them because you bust. It's a little different in Spots because you kind of can push within a turn depending on which action you get, but then it's ultimately turn to turn that you have to decide, am I going to continue pushing or am I going to kind of take a break to score my dogs? Because whenever you finish a dog and it has all the dice on it, you can take a turn off to just flip all those dogs and now they're safe. If you would bust, you're not going to lose those dice. However, there's the allure of, if I keep going and I can manage to finish all the dogs at once, so I don't have any remaining open dice spaces, they instantly flip without me needing to take a turn off. And I think this is just like a brilliant tension because it's a race with other players, and so you really don't want to take a turn off to just flip ones, without finishing some of the other ones. But at the same time, what is your tolerance for risk? Because the further you go or the more dogs you have that you're building up dice, if you bust, you're losing all of that progress. So I really like the kind of rhythm change, I guess, of the push your luck kind of being turn to turn rather than just an individual push on every single turn. Another thing I like about it is the way that the game kind of gets harder to finish as you get closer to having 6 dogs. And this is kind of because the more dogs you have available at any given time, the more chances when you roll dice that you're going to have places to put them. But as you get down to just 1 or 2 dogs, and maybe you only have a couple spaces left, I can maybe only roll a 2 or a 5, it can get tricky to finish that because a lot of the actions become more risky now, because if I'm rolling more dice, if I'm not rolling 2s or 5s, I have the potential of busting. And so I find that it has this nice kind of game arc of, someone is getting closer to winning, but it's almost like they slow down as they get close to it because it's like hard to finish, and it kind of leaves it open for people to make a comeback. And because it's a push your luck game, a lot of these people that are behind are going to push harder. And, so there's the possibility of very exciting comebacks because somebody that pushed harder actually pulled it off. Um, and that's another thing that I like is the way that the design guarantees that the final thing that happens in the game is an exciting moment. The game is always won on a die roll that finished the remaining spaces. And that may have been somebody that was close and just got their last one. It could be somebody that had an amazing, push your luck action. I know I've had games where I had one where I had like 3 remaining spots, and I did an action that let me roll 3 dice, and I rolled exactly the 3. And that moment of just everybody around the table is like, what? Because that just ended the game immediately. I actually really like the design decision that it doesn't go around the table. Again, there's no like give everybody an equal amount of turns. Like you maybe sacrifice a little bit of fairness there, but I think what you gain in just the climax of just an instant win on a die roll is totally worth it. And then on top of all that, the 6 actions, the tricks that are being used it's a system for some nice variability. So the game actually includes tons of different tricks that you can swap in and out. There's 2 of them that always stay the same. And that really helps it keep fresh, and is just also kind of a fun design space to see kind of some of the ideas that the designers came up with for some of these tricks. Like, what are the different ways that you can roll and push your luck? And it's fun how they tie it in then to the dog theme with some of these thematic things like fetch or beg, or, beg I remember is, gets you some of these bones in the game, which are what allow you to get rerolls, which is another fun thing in a dice game of when do I use my rerolls? How much do I stock up on that resource to have that flexibility? So a lot of things to like here. And I think it breaks into a little bit of new ground, nothing too groundbreaking, but I really like some of the things that it's doing within the push the luck genre. Onward to number 4 is another one that actually falls at least somewhat under the push your luck umbrella. This is Raw, which is originally a 1999 release from very famous designer Reiner Knizia. Recently got a really nice kind of Kickstarter reprint from 25th Century Games. Finally had the chance to try it. This has been on my list to try for like 15 years, and I finally played it. And what just a beautiful, simple yet design that has so much that can come out of it. Like the ratio of rules to like interesting situations is really, really great here. For those that don't know, it's an auction game where everybody has these sun tiles. Depending on the number of players, you may have like 3 or 4 of them that'll be like 10, 7, 2. And there's only one of each number in the game, and it's all open information. So you know exactly what numbers everybody else has and which ones you have. And then on everybody's turn, you're revealing a tile from the bag to add to the current kind of offer that's going to be bid on. And each player has the choice to either add an additional tile, or they can call raw, and that will begin an auction where, going around the table, everybody gets one chance to bid one of their sun tiles to win that complete set. Super simple, right? There's also the possibility of you could draw a raw tile, which forces that. The only difference being that if it's forced, no one is... if the bidding round was forced, no player is forced to bid. Like everybody could pass and we would just continue. However, if somebody calls raw, they have to, if everybody else passes, they have to bid on it because they called raw. But there's a big advantage to calling raw, because if you're the one that calls raw, you are going to get to bid last. It's going to begin with the player to your left. And bidding last is hugely powerful because you see what everybody does and then you can react to it. And there is just so much interest that comes out of this dynamic of when do I call raw? It's open information. I can see what sun tiles people have. So at any given point, we know exactly who has like the trump sun tile. That's the person that if they want to win it, they can guarantee it because they have the highest sun tile. Well, if that's not me, do I want to force raw calls while the set is smaller and not as good so that they're forced with a tough decision of do I, bid for this smaller set that's not as good using my best tile that I was hoping to get something else with. But if I don't bid on it, I may be allowing someone who is got a really low tile to actually get very good value. And so there's this interplay of kind of how do you put your opponents in situations where they're forced to make those kinds of tough decisions. There's also a great push your luck within the round, this is kind of where more of the push your luck comes in, of the round will last as long as anybody has any sun tiles left, as well as we haven't drawn a certain amount of raw tiles. And that's, very variable as far as you could draw a lot of raw tiles or not very many, just depending on what's drawn from the bag. And so there's a question of how long do I stay in the round? Do I, let other people win things and hold on to my bidding tiles, hoping that later I can get some really nice sets that there's not as much competition over? Or even potentially be the last person in the round. Everybody else is out. I'm the only one taking turns now. I can just go add a tile, add a tile, add a tile, make a mega set that I can take with my one. Well, that's only possible if we haven't drawn enough raw tiles. And once it gets to the point that we're one raw tile away, now it's very risky, because if I draw that last raw tile, the round instantly ends. I don't get an opportunity to bid on the set. I just don't get to use my remaining sun tiles. So yeah, it's one that, at least from my perspective of the games I've played in the modern hobby, despite it being 25 years old, it felt very fresh. And it was just it's always cool to find a game that does so much with so little, and like that from the initial reading of the rules, you don't see the types of things that are necessarily going to happen. But once you start playing, there's multiple times where you go, oh, this is actually very interesting, and there's another interesting thing in the game is that the winning sun tile bid becomes a part of the next set. So you're not just bidding on the set of tiles, you're also bidding on a sun tile that's going to be available to you in the following round. So how much do you value that? If it's the one out there, which is the worst tile, like, do you really want to, how good does the set need to get before you're okay taking that? So very, very cool design. I admittedly haven't played a ton of auction games. I know Reiner Knizia has a lot of them. I know there's Amun-Re, there's Modern Art, there's like a whole bunch. He's definitely explored that genre. But Raw was the one that kind of caught my eye the most from a gamer perspective, like the one I was most interested in playing. Partly because of that combination of like the push your luck, the set collection with the auctioning instead of just kind of pure auctioning. But it does have me intrigued, because I've found Raw to be such an intriguing game that maybe I need to check out some of these other ones as well. So Raw comes in at my number 4 most inspiring game of the year. Number 3 is one in a space that for a while I was actually kind of trying to explore this space from a designer perspective, and that's racing games. I was spending some time on kind of my own design of a racing game, kind of thinking of what I would want from a racing game. A few years back, there weren't that many, what I would say, really good racing games. Or at least I hadn't found one that I felt was like one I wanted to keep in my collection. Well, that I can no longer say that because of Heat Pedal to the Metal, which came out recently from Days of Wonder, has been really a hot game, pun intended. And it's one that just, I'm like, man, they nailed it. They nailed the racing feel, and just, it's such a simple design, the way the card play works, but it totally nails everything I would want from a racing game. So one of the things, like when I was brainstorming, what do I want from a racing game, is like, it's got to feel fast. Like, the accuracy isn't great if it's bogging down to where you feel like you're crawling around the track. And Heat does a very good job of this, of on any given turn, like when you're shifted up into the 3rd and 4th gears, you're potentially moving 10, 15 spaces. So you really do feel like, man, on these straightaways, I can tear around the track, but then I got to slow down for the curves. And it's really how it handles the curves that's very brilliant here, which is that your speed going around a curve can't exceed that curve's basically limit for the speed. Or if you do go over, you're going to have to spend heat because you're pushing your vehicle so hard. And so there's just a lot of interesting decisions that come from this, specifically that heat mechanic of, it's a very powerful resource of, I can use this to squeeze out a little bit more. There's actually also a like boost mechanic that you can decide to take a heat to boost a little bit more, which could position you well. And so you're kind of managing this heat resource, which is a bit of a push your luck, because they then clog up your deck, and then you'd have to get rid of them, you would have to Sorry, I hear the car leaving from the garage in the other room, but I'm losing my train of thought. Um, but then yeah, to get the heat back to be able to use it again, you have to cool it either by being in a lower gear, or sometimes if you're playing with some of the other modules, there's ways you can get cooling. So I love that resource of heat and how you use it and go between. Um, I also love the stress cards. So, a lot of times if you're in fourth gear, you have to play four cards, and those cards might be three, two, four. And so those, are going to dictate how many spaces you go. But you can also play these stress cards, and eventually you're likely going to need to play these stress cards because otherwise you can't get them out of your hand. And a stress card, you don't know what it's going to be. When you actually go to resolve it, you're going to draw until you get a card that has the little speedometer icon, and that's going to be anywhere from 1 to 4. And so when we're talking about these curves that you really can't, you don't want to go too fast around, or you're trying to set yourself up to be in a good spot to get through the curve on the next turn, these stress cards are really like, it's got this push your luck of when do I use them? When can I afford? How am I okay doing it if like one of those four options would be catastrophic? Like it's like if I draw a 4, my car is going to spin out because I'm not going to have enough heat to pay with it. But at the same time, it could push me right back into the pack. I'd be able to slipstream. And so it's those kinds of things that I think just really, really works well. Just that core system. And then it's very cool how on top of that core system, they can kind of expand it with some of this variability. They've got the different tracks that have kind of different feels. Then they have the different modules. There's the weather module that adds like different kind of effects or conditions to certain turns. There's also the garage module that you get to customize your deck and have some special cards that nobody else has, which is super great for kind of the replay value if you kind of value that variability. On top of that, it has a great AI automa system where you can, if you don't, it can play up to 6 players, but if you don't have 6 players, you can just still play with 6 cars and have those run by that system. And it's very clean. It's one of the best types. It's so perfect for how you want this game to be because you don't want to be bogged down having to resolve some complicated thing for how these cars move. You like flip a card, and once you understand how that works, I can move 4 AI cars in all of 15 seconds. And it's just like, oh, this person goes here, this person goes here, this person goes here. And it works great. They usually kind of stay with the pack and provide some interest. So I think that is really well done. Really a game that I have enjoyed, but also just admire. It feels like this design team who had worked before on, I'm going to forget the name of the cycling game that this is somewhat inspired by. But it feels like they really cracked the code on racing games, at least for this style of kind of pure racing game. So I think it's a really, really clever and clean design. Number 2, this is one that is very different from anything I've played, which is often something that can power it onto a list like this. And I'll just say it, this is Bullet Heart. So this is from Level 99 Games, and it kind of combines, thematically, it's like this anime bullet hell, your bullets are flying at you and you're clearing them thing. But from a mechanics standpoint, you've got these bullets coming towards you, and if they ever hit you, that's your life, and that's how you get eliminated. And you want to use your character's pattern cards to clear these bullets, and so you're manipulating the positions of the bullets to kind of match these patterns so that you can clear the bullets off of your board. But what's interesting is you're drawing these bullets randomly from a bag. And so if I draw the red 4, I have to count 4 empty spaces in the red column coming down. And I might get a green 3. And so you're adding these on, and you can keep going as much as you want. In fact, by the end of the round, you must draw all of your bullets. But there's some risk as you keep going, because once you have a certain amount of bullets in a column, say red, because you skip over bullets when placing new bullets, you may be at risk now that if you draw a red 4, it actually would hit you because you already have bullets in that column. And so you have to kind of decide, when do I pause? You can pause drawing to apply patterns, and you have these action points that let you do the actions to actually manipulate the board. So you might be able to spend an action point to move a bullet 1 space, left, right, or down. And so, once you're at risk, it's like, well, it'd be kind of nice to draw more, because if I draw more, I may set up patterns or get close to patterns without having to spend a lot of action points. Like they made the density of bullets just increases the chances that things might be in the right place. But at the same time, drawing more is going to risk that I might get hit. Do I use some action points to clear something now, just to prevent that? Or maybe I don't even clear anything, but I just bump bullets to take one out of my most full column so that it is more balanced, so I'm not at risk in any one given column. So just that interplay I find to be really unique. Like this kind of push your luck from the bag, but then it's puzzly, like you're making patterns and stuff, but then it's like action points because your character is going to have different things that you can be using these action points to do. And everybody's doing this simultaneously. Now, I should say I've played this primarily solo at this point, so there aren't a lot of other people doing anything when I'm doing this. But yeah, just very unique and very lots of opportunity to feel very clever. Like there's many times where I realize, oh, like if I do this and like this, I could actually set up this pattern and clear, and like that actually leaves this bullet that I could use for this other pattern. So there's lots of those moments of like, oh yeah, I kind of solved it. Like I had these things at my disposal and I figured out a really good way to use them. Another thing I really love about it, and this is kind of a calling card for level 99 games, is that they kind of throw in the kitchen sink when it comes to variability and characters. And this is no exception, where the base game comes with 8 different heroines that you can play as. And they are wildly different. I mean, you could have had this game, everything I just described, and not done this, not had crazy variable powers. And I think it would have been a fun game, but this really takes it to the next level. When you're playing one character that's got like crosshairs that she moves around on it, and all of her patterns are like relative to her crosshair patterns. Or you might have another one that he pushes bullets and actually never clears them with his patterns. The way he clears bullets is by pushing them off any of the sides of the board besides your bottom where you would get hit. And so that, I mean, completely different. There's another one that the patterns all add the numbers on the chips in the pattern, and based on the sum determines how you get to clear, whether you get to clear within the pattern or outside the pattern. So I really love that. It's cool how, I mean, this is probably something I repeat a lot on these videos, is I love when you define a really solid core system, and then it's a system that allows you to really explore cool variations when it comes to abilities or just, variables on top of that. And Bullet is a great example of it. There is a very interesting design space of coming up with new characters for Bullet. And I know I only have Bullet Heart, but there's also Bullet Star, which is a standalone with just as many. And then they have Bullet Orange, and I think they have like a couple more that came out recently with a Kickstarter. So they're definitely exploring the design space, but I imagine it's very fun as designers to kind of push what they can do with this. So yeah, I really have enjoyed it. I admire Level 99 Games for really having some games that push doing something that you haven't seen in any other game. Another great example of that is Millennium Blades. If you haven't checked that out, there's nothing else like that game. And again, it amps the variability through the roof. So it's always interesting to see what they're up to over there. And Bullet Heart, I think, is definitely one of their stronger designs, at least that I've played. Which brings me to my number one, which from a player perspective, this one's pretty divisive. There's people that love it. There are people that hate it. And this is Challengers, which I think actually this last year won the Kennerspiel German Game of the Year, Advanced Gamer of the Year award. And Challengers basically takes the game of war. If you remember, like, reveal a card, whoever has the high card takes them, complete luck. It takes that and expands it into a little bit more robust system, kind of this capture your flag. I play cards until my sum beats your current one that's holding the flag, then I take the flag, then you get to go. And it either, once somebody runs out of cards, whoever has the flag is going to win, or if somebody's bench fills up and they can't play on their bench, they lose, because whenever your cards get cleared, they go to your bench, and any unique card goes to a new slot. So any of the same card can take up one slot, but if you have more than 6 unique cards, you're going to lose at that point. So they expanded to a little bit more robust system that ultimately is still 90+% luck. Like within the game itself, there are very few decisions while you're playing out this war game that's kind of like war. There maybe is the occasional thing that lets you make a decision or peek at a card or something. But for the most part, completely random, which is why a lot of people hate this game. But then it takes that and says, okay, one game of challengers is actually going to be a full tournament where at any given point, if you're playing with the full 8-player count, we have 4 different games going simultaneously at like different arenas. So you can picture at the table, there's, 4 completely separate games happening side by side. And then once everybody's done with it, you look at your card and you be like, okay, my next game is at the red arena or whatever. And you're going to go there and play somebody different. But between each of these games, you're having the opportunity to go draw a few cards from the supply decks that have been chosen for that game and pick to add one to your deck. And so it's this very light deck building, and ultimately where the little bit of strategy comes in of like, okay, how can I better set up my deck to kind of auto play itself strategically and find cards that may combo together. And then you go right into another game and you do it again. By the end of all the like scheduled regular season games, you're going to see who has the most fame points from winning games. And though the 2 highest are then going to play each other for the championship. So that's kind of the core idea. Now, why does this rise to the top for me, like from a design perspective? I think one of the big reasons is the way that it utilizes the tournament structure. So usually a tournament structure is something that is outside of the game itself. Like you have a game that then can be played in a tournament context by playing subsequent games of it. I've enjoyed organizing like a casual Keyforge tournament where we play games of Keyforge, we have a bracket. It's very fun. And to that point, I think that's what the designers kind of saw is there is a lot of fun in the bracket tournament system, like apart from the game that's being used. And I mean, you don't have to look any further than March Madness, the college basketball tournament, where they have a 64-team single elimination tournament. And one of the common things that fans do is they try to predict the bracket before this. The fact that it's structured that way adds so much extra excitement onto that event just because of the nature of a bracket tournament. And so Challengers kind of says, okay, how can we take that and put it in a game instead of being wrapped around the game? And so within one session of Challengers, you get that feel. And I think that probably pushed a lot of the other design decisions, because if you start there, you're going to go, okay, well, whatever the individual games are need to be quick, right? Like if otherwise it's going to be a very long game. My Keyforge tournaments take 8 hours for us to get through all these. So you need them to be short. And then, if you're thinking about like, okay, I want this tournament thing to be somewhat accessible. Like if this is going to be a thing that goes up to 8 players, is kind of almost more of a party feel. You want it to be pretty accessible. So I can see why they kind of landed on this extension of war that they did. But it is very cool how when this game is being played with a full group, there is just an energy that's different from other games, because you're hearing this all happen, these games around you, but you're not in those games. You're just like, but then you may play that person. It's got this like event feel within a game that we're all playing, which I think is just very cool. And I haven't really seen games do that. I also like the way that they expanded the basic war concept to make it a little bit more robust. I think there's a lot of good modern examples of like taking a classic game and saying, what would this look like in a modern, with some more modern design sensibilities with it. For example, King Domino kind of takes dominoes and does something a little bit more modern with it. I should have thought some examples beforehand, because there's many good examples of kind of, like this takes that classic thing and expands it into, kind of this new modern game. I think it works well here, and I think it serves the design goal of the game well. In that, a big thing with this game is that you pick which decks are going to be in play. So I think in the base set, you're picking like 5 out of the 6. So there's not going to be like that much wild variability. But they've already released a second set for this. So you can imagine as you get more of these sets of cards and you're picking 5 out of 12 or even more, each game could actually feel pretty different with which sets of cards come up. Um, and so it is so important that the core system is really flexible for like variable abilities and stuff. And if you think of just war, like there's just not enough there to come up with a lot of really interesting things going on. But just the simple addition of kind of this capture the flag and the concept of like the one that's holding the flag versus ones that maybe, because like if you use 3 cards to win the flag, only your top one stays. And then there's the concept of the bench. So suddenly you can have all these effects, like if something's on the bench or like while this is on the bench, something can happen. So I think they did a good job of creating a core system that was simple because it needed to be simple for this game to kind of achieve its goals, but still has like those touch points for these types of abilities because you want the types of cards that somebody draws between rounds and looks and goes, whoa, this is really cool. This card does this thing that like maybe I wouldn't have thought of. Like that's what you want in this game as you continue to expand it. So yeah, Challengers rose to my number 1 mostly because I feel like it really kind of pushed into a different space of exploring like game structure within a game. It got me thinking a lot about like, challenging assumptions of what the core structure of a game experience needs to be. I mean, do we need to assume that all players are playing with each other at the same time? Like, what are things can open up if you're saying that the game at times breaks into pockets of players that then, combine later or switch or something? I think there's some interesting design space there to be explored, and I like that Challengers got me thinking about it. So there you have it. That was probably not the shortest video. You get me rambling about these. There's a reason that these games end up on the list is because I like talking about them. Hopefully it sparks some things for you too. That's really the point of this video, is that, it might spark kind of really inspire some of that game design energy for you as well. Maybe you're excited about getting back to one of your designs or have a new idea for something. I'd love to hear what games you've played recently that you have found particularly inspiring as a designer. You can leave those in the comments below. Otherwise, have a great year of designing, and I will see you in the next one.